in my last video when I was talking about leadership, I sort of mentioned this notion of favorableness and how it relates to autocracy and democracy. So I just want to spend the very first few moments of this video just explaining that concept to you in a little bit more detail. This is what you see on the screen here is actually Fiedler's contingency model of leadership. Now, I don't think that you're going to be asked to graph this out in your exam, but it just kind of exemplifies something you might be asked. If I spelled Fiedler right, that would help. Fiedler's model. Fiedler's contingency model. So I do think you might be asked about the notion of favorableness and the relationship between whether autocracy and democracy is more successful. And really what I said in my last video is that, and we can see it on this graphic illustration here, is that if the situation is low favorableness, we see that the blue line, autocracy, is more effective. So we use an autocratic method if the situation is low favorableness. If the situation is moderate favorableness, look, we'll see that autocracy effectiveness declines and that democracy will work better. That's the higher point, the higher peak. But as the situation becomes highly favorable, then autocracy returns to being more relevant, more important. So the question really I want to address with you is, what do we mean by favorableness? What is favorableness? Because when I sort of first learned this, I sort of thought, well, favorableness could be like, you know, that you're winning, or it's going well, or whatever. It's actually three specific things, favorableness, okay? So it's the leader's strength. So leader's strength. And when I say strength, I don't mean like the strength of their character or the strength of their arms. I mean the strength of their position. Are they in a very fixed, strong position within their role? If that's a highly favourable situation, such as yes, they are, they're really fixed and they're very well respected, then autocracy seems to, according to Fiedler at least, seems it's going to work better. If they're kind of moderate, you know, like the group's kind of warming to them, but they're not sure, that this position's not that strong, maybe it's a bit confused, then democracy might work better. And if it's a really low favorableness, you know, you're fighting for your position, or maybe the leader has potentially got to be replaced, then autocracy, getting exactly what they want in that situation, seems to be the way to go about it. The second thing is about task complexity. Okay, so when we say task complexity, we also talk about task clarity, what's required of the performers. If it's a highly favourable situation, such as the task ahead is very simple, it's obvious what's required, autocracy will seem to work better. If it's kind of a bit unclear, not sure, then democracy might work better, sharing, coming up with those ideas we talked about in the last video. Whereas if it's a really complicated task and nobody's clear of what's required, then the leader has to take the bull by the horns and take an autocratic perspective and say, this is the way we're going to do it. And finally, on favorableness, we also need to say, or consider the group relations. So how strong is the leader's actual relations with the group? If they're very, very strong and highly favourable, then autocracy will work. If they're shockingly awful, then again the leader has to kind of show their character, show their status, and be autocratic again. But if they're kind of sometimes up, sometimes down, not sure, then you need to bring people's ideas into play and have a democratic approach. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to explain to you about the concept of favorableness. But really, the rest of this video is going to be about the multi-dimensional model of leadership. And I kind of want to explain that to you in relatively simple terms before looking at what's going to appear, at least at first glance, to be a slightly complicated kind of notion. But actually, I think we can simplify it a great deal. And this is what I want you to know from the very outset of this conversation. When we judge the success of a leader, so when we judge the success of a leader, or the effectiveness of a leader, I suppose we could judge it, we kind of need to do that on two levels.